If there was any game series out there famous for having a nebulous story, it'd be the Soulsborne games. But a close second would be Five Nights at Freddy's. Both franchises have a massive amount of creators flipping out for the camera and an even larger amount of them meticulously hunting for clues to the story in each game as they play them. Except, not really, because it turns out that most of the FNAF fanbase, content creators who collect a paycheck included, don't actually play the games.
Why isn't this working?
And I am here to tell you that if you take the time and sit through a whole workshift for yourself, the story of FNAF becomes much simpler within the context of your playthrough. So that's exactly what my fiancée Kestrel and I did. Twice. And not only did I find contextual reason for every Easter egg in the game, but I also put together story pieces that many other videos missed because they lacked the in-game context for their encounter. Now the goal of these videos, cause I'm covering all the games, is to remove the concept of one four-letter word. Lies. I mean lore. Lore is just another name for story details we don't understand. So let's get this ship started with the objective story of Five Nights at Freddy's 1. The game opens with this retro tablet called a newspaper that's advertising a night security gig that doesn't pay well. And I want people to listen to that again. The pay is advertised on the paper. There are so many videos using minimum wage calculations when it's gig work, guys, not a regular job that uses minimum wage. For those of you that don't know, you typically sign on for flat rates with gigs. Do you have any idea how many timeline theories are completely invalidated by this? You can charge whatever you want for a gig. That's how they work. That means this game could take place in the 2000s now, or almost any other year. Like, this is literally the first screen we see when the game starts, and I have never once watched a video where this is highlighted. Now, before we start saying, oh, that's Michael Afton, and he's going after Freddy's locations to clean up after his dad, I'm gonna need you to calm the hell down, and remember, I'm only using the objective information from this game at the time of its release. So we dip to black, get this little prompt, and then hear the man, the myth, the legend, the phone guy.
Hello? Hello?
And right away, we have the first disconnect between people who play the game and people who don't, because this is a game first and a story second. Phone Guy here pulls double duty as the player's teacher as well as the main characters. Not only is this a cool choice, but it's borderline mandatory because there are no written tutorials in this game. Scott expects us to listen and mess around in order to learn how to play. Based on the Night 1 call, here's what we know. 1. Phone Guy used to work here, specifically in our office, and is finishing his last week. This is plot relevant, but it also pulls double duty as the player tutorial.
So let's just focus on getting you through your first week, okay?
2. He has to read from a legal prompt that says the company doesn't take responsibility for employee safety, and if they discover damage or absence of life, they literally clean up the scene first, including replacing the carpets, and then call it in.
Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for damage to property or a person. Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing person report will be filed within 90 days or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached and the carpets have been replaced. Blah, blah, blah.
Not only is that hilarious, but it tells the player that this company is awful. Next, Phone Guy talks about the animatronics with a fair amount of reverence. He treats them kinda like people by brushing off their behavior as having been around for 20 years without getting a bath and saying we should treat them with respect.
If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
From here, he explains the infamous Bite of 87. The bots used to be able to walk around during the day, but after one of them bit somebody's frontal lobe, they're only allowed to do so at night, and boom, we have our backstory while introducing the threat of the game.
They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the Bite of 87. Yeah. If they happen to see you after hours, probably won't recognize you as a person. They'll most likely see you as a metal endoskeleton without its costume on.
if they catch us, Phone Guy says they're gonna think we're a naked Indo and stuff us into a suit where our eyes are gonna pop out of the mask, which is exactly what we see in the game over screen. Finally, he finishes the tape by straight up telling us, the players, to check the cameras and close the doors only if necessary to conserve power.
Check those cameras and remember to close the doors only if absolutely necessary. Gotta conserve power.
Everything we learn reinforces how bad the company sucks for the sake of the joke. Now I know there was a fair amount of information in that first call, but honestly that's all we needed to have this game set up as far as the story goes. We're a night guard, we've got a phone mentor, and we're watching a pizzeria with animatronics that will stuff us into a suit if they catch us, and the company we work for f***ing sucks. So let's survive to night 2 and see how the story progresses from here. Funny enough, in my playthrough, I actually got hit with my first It's Me screen before the phone call even happened. But I'll talk more about that later. Here's what's going on in Night 2. First things first, he is literally telling the player that the game is going to get more difficult as the nights go by.
I won't talk quite as long this time since Freddy and his friends tend to become more active as the week progresses.
This is also why he says Freddy is a lot more active in the dark. He's not talking about the character. He's alluding to Freddy grabbing that ass when you run out of power and setting up how he becomes more of a threat. Next, he hints to the door lights being your last chance to find an animatronic before it gets into the office, even warning you that there's a couple of seconds to react to them being there.
Be sure to check the door lights. You might only have a few seconds to react.
Finally, he hints that the cameras need to be watched to prevent Foxy from chasing you down. Phone Guy's suggestion that maybe Foxy doesn't like being watched is also followed up by an actual, I don't know.
The character in there seems unique in that he becomes more active if the cameras remain off for long periods of time. I guess he doesn't like being watched. I don't know.
And it's also slightly misleading, since as a number of people who actually play these games will tell you, we just need to be on the cameras to keep the pirate at bay. That also sets up that the phone guy doesn't exactly know how to completely defend himself from these animatronics too. Before we move ahead to Night 3, I want to point out that I think it's cool how Scott set up Night 1 as more of an atmospheric experience, and if you're brave enough to stick it out, then he decides to tell you about the door lights, Freddy, and Foxy. Okay, Night 3. Night the Third is all about gameplay info again, not story. The part about how people don't last that long is just a horror game joke. PG-13 suggests that if you get caught, you should try not moving to see if you can trick the animatronics into thinking you're an empty suit.
If you happen to get caught and want to avoid getting stuffed into a Freddy suit, try playing dead. You know, go limp.
But as we all know, the only thing that can save you is that 6 a.m. end time. Again, this is setting up that Phone Guy doesn't exactly understand the animatronics either. Beyond that, there's nothing special about Night 3 besides the difficulty actually cranking up. So I find Phone Guy's line
things start getting real tonight
to be both ironic and hella funny in the context that this was supposed to be Scott Cawthon's last game. Alright, Night 4 is the moment I think we've all been waiting for, because tonight's phone call is nothing but story.
I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's been a bad night here for me.
The phony homie gets caught by the animatronics, and even though it plays Freddy's March...
Back there, you know... Oh no.
The jump scare noise is not his, but I'll talk more about Yellow Bear later. This reveals that not only is Phone Guy sleeping with the mascot fishes and has been since before we were hired, but that the company knew that, cleaned up after his mess, and then hired you to replace him. Which is exactly what the legal statement threatened to do. This is doubly hilarious because it means that he got during his last week of work. It's a retirement joke, you know, like in movies without a Let's Player pretending to be an actor. There is plenty to talk about here, but it's going to become more relevant when I get to the Easter eggs later, so let's move on for now.
That counted?
Night 5 opens with a garbled message from Autobiography of a Yogi. And it means absolutely nothing. It's a bunch of spooky noises from a sound library that Scott used because it fit the vibe. He could have easily used this noise from the same sound library, by the way. But he didn't, so let's talk about the chat. Here we see that we earned 120 bucks and our name is Mike Schmidt and we live in the same year as Mega Man. So I said this in the last video and I'll say it again, the chronology is what's important, but the specific year doesn't matter. Quit falling for all that clickbait. Whether it's 1989, 1992, or 2005 is irrelevant. Scott could have made the paycheck for Tree Fitty and it still would have fit because this is a spooky horror game where you work at a crappy job because the company is already doing shady shit. Now, I'm not exactly a legal guy, but I'm fairly certain you had to report to the authorities that somebody exited stage left the day it happened and not up to 90 days later. But even then, the overtime check we get from Night 6 should also be evidence that we can't use the dollar amount to find the year. Also, that's the only thing special about Night 6, so we're gonna skip it. Night 7 is Custom Night, and this is when I want to talk about the ending and the Easter eggs before jumping into the final analysis. For starters, we get fired at the end of the shift for tampering with electronics, general unprofessionalism, and odor. And this is just another meta joke, okay? Not our character getting fired, but the reasons behind it. Scott was openly candid about how difficult he thought his game was, and so this screen was made with that in mind, not the story. Yet. We're being called out for odor and unprofessionalism because we're most likely sweaty and pissed off from trying to figure out the game itself, especially on a first playthrough. And we quite literally tamper with the animatronics when we set their difficulty before starting the night. We survived the game and we got a middle finger for it because the company still wins. But now, let's talk about the Easter eggs. The coolest thing about Custom Night is that we can set the AI of the gang to 0 and almost freely explore looking for Scott's hidden secrets. And in my opinion, that is 100% what this night was originally designed for. So what are those Easter eggs? Well, most of them revolve around posters changing on the walls, such as the hallways changing to screaming, crying kid faces, or the ARC words of the franchise, "It's me." For those of you who don't know, ARC words are a recurring phrase in a series that fills a thematic and sometimes literal purpose in the work. A good example would be "May the Force be with you," or "With great power comes great responsibility," and my favorite,
I guess even though we were free, we were still slaves in the mind.
Message!
"It's me" can fill multiple roles in this game, or none of them. They could just be cool spooky shit Scott thought of to sprinkle throughout the game, but to fully get into that, we need to explain the other two biggest secrets. The first is the rules poster changing to newspaper reports about missing children. Digesting these one at a time fills in the blanks and explains all the spooky crap that's going on here. Kids were unalived here. Some SLC punk used a suit to lure them in, their bodies were never found, and considering that you hear groans coming from the mascots when they enter the office, and somebody snitched on the blood coming out of them, we can safely say that we are encouraged to believe that the kids' bodies were stuffed in the animatronics after a furry got them. Which is why you occasionally get this game over screen where Bonnie's soulless bunny eyes get these two little dots slowly appearing. The bots are being possessed. This also explains why the less famous Easter eggs like the heads turning around are capable of doing that. The place is haunted, alright? But what about that little number discrepancy? Well, it turns out there's a hidden fifth animatronic, the mascot formerly known as Yellow Bear. Occasionally, the Let's Party poster will switch to Freddy trying his best to remove his own head, and even less common still, it will change to this poster of a yellow bear. If you stare at it for too long, you'll hear Macaulay Culkin laugh, and then Golden Freddy will appear in your office all slumped over and creepy looking before throwing the "It's me" messages at you. Then he hits you with a close-up and crashes your game with the same noise from the call on Night 4. Now, unlike the others, this guy can appear in the office with or without the doors closed, and has no animation on the model whatsoever. It's also important to note that if you punch 1987 into the Custom Night, you get his crash screen. But Scott only put that in the game to squash the rumors about there being a hidden ending using that number, so we can safely write that out as a developer joke. Now, at long last, let's finally summarize what happens in this game. We play as Mike Schmidt, who takes a gig for a night guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. They are a terrible company that is willing to cover up your passing and report it after cleaning up the evidence, but at least the newspaper ad warns you up front about the pay and the hours. Your only source of training comes from Phone Guy, who turns out to have shaken off the mortal coil before finishing his last week on the job before you got there. If the robots you're hired to watch end up getting to you in the office, they're gonna stuff you into a suit and your eyes will pop out the mask, ending your everything. The robots and the building itself are weird and haunted, because 5 kids met their fate at the hands of somebody's persona here, and their corpses were hidden inside of the bots. Their bodies were reported as never found because, as we know, the company cleans up the scene before filing anything. Beyond that, the company has had other issues in the past, as an animatronic bit somebody's frontal lobe, causing an event known as the Bite of 87. Even though all of the robots have evidence for causing the bite, such as Bonnie literally biting you in his jump scare, there are a few culprits who stand out above the others, with the most obvious being Foxy, who deadass sprints after you and is placed in an out-of-order section of the restaurant. He also has an Easter egg that says "It's me" on his sign every once in a while. The other candidates are the 2 Freddys. The brown version has rules posted up saying "Don't touch Freddy," and he appears to have an outline of a bloody handprint on his head in some of these pictures, while Golden Freddy is uniquely slumped over in an awkward position with a loose jaw. Granted, Golden Freddy looks hollow inside and lacks the inner endoskeleton we see in the others, yet still possesses the ghostly white eye shine. His extra spookiness and rare appearances also lead the player to assume there's something special about this animatronic in particular. While I think any of these candidates are viable choices, I'm trying to make this video as objective as possible without strict confirmation, so I'm gonna say it was Foxy. The reason being that he's literally out of order, and all of the information and context that we have for the bite is stated in-game without having to hunt for Easter eggs, as opposed to being hidden like many of the other story beats. Meanwhile, Golden Freddy is a rare chance to begin with, much like the story of the missing children itself. So I think contextually, within the game, his existence is linked to that bit of story. Finally, Freddy could have caused the bite because of the handprint, but I actually believe the handprint is there because Phone Guy did it when he got caught. I think we're led to believe, especially since we can encounter the "It's me" hallucinations at any point in the game, even night 1, that Phone Guy is the one stopped in Freddy in those flashes, and these human eyes are his. It also explains why the Freddy "It's me" vision appears when Golden Freddy does. We hear Golden Freddy's jump scare noise when Phone Guy is caught because Golden Freddy caused it and Phone Guy got stuffed into one of the normal Freddy suits. Now, that's a lot of assumptions, but to me, this uses the context of everything in this one game the best. Foxy makes the most sense as the Bite of 87 guy because, as my fiancée herself demonstrated in the playthrough, we never encountered Golden Freddy, and you're not likely to outside of Custom Night. Because the trick to beating the game is looking at just Freddy on the cams and using the door lights for the rest. You don't even look at the Golden Freddy room when you're trying to beat the game and understand how it works. The "It's me" hallucinations with real human eyes make sense to be Phone Guy because he tells us that our eyes pop out of the mask when we get caught, which we see when we lose. And we find out on night 4 that he's already been caught and never got to retire. Finally, Golden Freddy and the missing kid stuff exists to fill in the blanks during night 7, after you've already completed the main game and can take your time looking around. Then we get fired for messing with the literal difficulty of the robots. We have everything we need in this one entry to tell a complete narrative, except for the one who took out the kids. But there's still plenty of wiggle room to finalize all of the details in a later release. So all of these conclusions I've made make sense when you live through it yourself, because you're experiencing this knowledge as it happens organically and not in a vacuum like in a video essay. But the problems and misunderstandings of the story stem from not having a personal experience and cannonballing into the lore pool first. However, I have been talking for way too long, and we've still got at least 5 shifts left, so if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching until the end, and for now, I'm bowing out, and I'll see you all on the next shift.